Hey, good afternoon and welcome back to Stay at Home Dad in the Kitchen. Today we're going to make one of those items that is a long cook time, but a very, very simple prep time. Very excellent dish. Most people really love this, and I can't think of anybody that doesn't really like pork chops. I mean, I know there's some people out there with some religious affiliations that won't eat pork chops. I apologize. Move on to the next recipe, okay? But for the rest of you out there, we're going to make, like I said, very simple prep time. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is going to turn my oven on to 325, okay, and let it start itself up. 325, start. That'll heat up while I'm making this. Probably will be finished before the time that it's ready to go. We're going to be making today pork chops with gravy and sauerkraut in the oven, okay? The pork chops that I'm using, alright, I tend to like the boneless pork chops, and we usually get the sirloin center cut. Don't get them unless they're on sale. Shop around. I think I have another, at least a blog or someplace that tells you about how to shop at the multiple locations. Point is, if you just wait it out, eventually the pork will go on sale. That's when you stock up and put it in your freezer for later. Okay? But today I've got 4 really nice center cut boneless pork chops. We're going to stick them right into the pan here. See how nice? And they're kind of nice and thick too. Okay, that's pretty good because they'll be really tender when they're finished. Got them in the pan now, and we're going to get rid of those. Alright, they're going to stay right here. What we're going to add to them today is we have sauerkraut. You can use any kind that comes in a can. I tend to like the jar because I'm not going to use this entire jar today, but that way I can reclose the jar and put it back for other things later that we like to cook sauerkraut with. Garlic powder, salt, and pepper. Anybody that knows me that's watched these videos before, these are the 3 things you need. If you only have 3 things in your kitchen, in your seasoning drawer, that's it, okay? Everything else is extra, alright? Finally, this is a McCormick's pack of pork gravy. Lots of people make them. Generic is fine. I would probably buy generic, except this is probably on sale and probably cost me less than the generic did, so I bought this one, okay? The pork gravy goes in 1 cup of water, which I've already parceled out for you. And now I'm going to stir this up before I stick the sauerkraut in. And remember, this fork was already touching the pork, so we're not going to stick it into the sauerkraut at all, so we don't taint the sauerkraut. But I will use it in the gravy because it doesn't matter. And then the fork is going to get put aside until I maybe move the pork chops around before we stick it in the oven. So we're going to stir this up and let it sit. It may have a little bit of lumps in it from when it sticks together. If you were to heat this on the stove, the lumps would come out. We don't really care because honestly, sometimes when these little specks of seasoning or gravy get stuck together and they land on the meat, they actually add a really nice bit of flavor to the meat where it hits. I'm going to sit that aside for a second. I'm going to open up the sauerkraut. Take another fork. Now, you don't want all the juice from the sauerkraut, so you can just leave some of the juice in there. But we're going to put a bunch of sauerkraut into the container here, so we just keep piling it in and around the pork. You're going to get gravy around all this eventually anyway, so you don't have to just throw it in there. Now, if you get some of the juice from the can, that's okay, or jar, that's okay. But the point is, we're going to attempt to get as little of the juice as possible. Some of it's going to come with the sauerkraut. That's all right. Throw it in there. Remember, don't touch the pork with your fork. That's called cross-contamination if you do that. We don't want that to happen. Anytime you work in the kitchen, you want to keep your meats, your knives that touch meats, or anything the meats touch, re-clean before you cut anything else on, like vegetables or anything else. With the amount of pork chops I got here today, I'm going to end up using about half the jar of sauerkraut. Alright. We're going to put the sauerkraut to the side over here. We're going to take the gravy, put that in there. Before I put the gravy in, I'm just going to squish the sauerkraut all evenly around the outside. try not to put it over top of the meat. You want to save the space on top of the meat for your seasonings in very few seconds. So you disperse the sauerkraut. Then we one last little stir. And we're going to pour that in on top of everything. Basically what we've got is the juice covering almost the entire portion of the bottom of the pan. Now, we're done with that. We take our garlic powder, we sprinkle it all over everything, especially on the meat, but you can sprinkle it right over the sauerkraut. Flavors everything. Awesome. Salt. Sauerkraut is a salty item unto itself, so we're only going to sprinkle a little bit and we're going to stay over top the meat with the salt. Black pepper. We like a lot of black pepper in our family, so we're just going to sprinkle it all over everything, liberally, as they say. Alright, so now, this is what it looks like before we put it in the oven. Okay? Now, before we stick it in the oven, we're going to do one more thing to that. We're going to put some aluminum foil on it. Get enough just for the whole thing. It's best when you're cooking in the oven for something like this to put the shiny side inside so that the heat stays in better. You slide it down one side like this. You bring it down the other side like that and you squeeze it in so it makes a nice seal. Now we're going to stick this in the oven for about 2 hours, 2.5 hours. At about the 2-hour mark, we're going to take the tent off to let it brown on the top. But in the meantime, the oven's almost up to speed, but I'll put it in anyway since we have such a long cook time. And in it goes. We'll check on it later. We're out. And here we have the finished product, all cooked in the oven. You can see it got nice and baked. It's got the sauerkraut is nice and cooked, so is the pork. It's going to be exceptionally tender, and the gravy has consolidated itself amongst the the sauerkraut and the pork to make flavoring all over the place. It's lovely. I'll show it to you on the plate.